Hey there, Blazer fans, and welcome to episode 25 of The Dragon's Den, a podcast for those that bleed green and gold. This week's guest is another great from the UAB football program, a pioneer for UAB that still has his name all over the UAB record books, Mr. John Whitcomb. It's easy to see how much this quarterback's legacy still lives on to this day from all the good comments I got on my social pages when I made his guest announcement. So I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Be sure to stick around after for a short This Week in Blazer History segment. And thanks for listening. All right, Blazer fans, I've got my guest here for episode 25 of The Dragon's Den, a former UAB football great who led the UAB Blazers from 1992 to 1994 in the quarterback position, Mr. John Whitcomb. John, how you doing today?
Doing great, Will. Thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure. You were a little bit before my time, but I hear about you all the time from my dad. I was just talking with him the other day about how I was going to have you on the podcast and how he was really excited about having you on. He said he wished we could have had you for a little bit longer, but I know the Blazer faithful are going to be really excited to have you on the podcast and get to know you a little bit better and go through some old memories with you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
So doing my research, I found some irony in the way that you got to UAB. You came to the Blazers after lettering at Southern Miss in 1990. Southern Miss is one of UAB's current rivals, and obviously we weren't back in the day, but what was it like at Southern Miss?
Yeah, it was kind of a crooked road to get to UAB. And, I did start out at USM, signed with them out of high school. And, back then, USM, they were considered a giant killer. They were consistently playing and beating the power teams. And, it was a very low budget program though, and it still is. Looking back on it, and if I'm being honest, I was probably a little spoiled, and I didn't really know if I belonged there. Didn't like the facilities or appreciate, the setup and the equipment. And, I have memories of guys having to, show the holes in their shoes or holes in their gloves just so they could get another pair. And I really didn't appreciate how lucky I was to be there. And, there were a lot of life lessons that I learned from my time there at USM, which was brief. As soon as I got to campus in Hattiesburg, I was able to work directly behind Brett Favre, which was an amazing experience. People bring it up to me all the time. And, really, it truly was amazing to work behind him. I worked very hard, did very well in the beginning, but I don't think I had the right mindset, and it caught up with me later on when my circumstances changed. And I guess I look back on it, I kind of regret that I couldn't see through my circumstances to see the valuable lessons that were being taught. USM and Hattiesburg, they have some of the finest people that I've ever known. Made some lifelong friends, and I really wish I'd appreciated the relationships more than I did. But all in all, I'm glad things worked out the way they did, because if I had not transferred, then I obviously wouldn't have found my way to UAB, and had all the great experiences and relationships that I have now because of UAB.
So you transferred to UAB, and what was so appealing to you about UAB, who at the time was only in their first year of Division III football in 1991?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the fall of 91, I had not arrived at UAB yet. So I was roaming around just looking for a school that wanted me and that would offer me a chance to compete. I wasn't really sure who to trust. And then along came Coach Jim Hilyer. He called me up and he brought me into Birmingham for a visit. And I will never forget that day. He took me into a conference room at Bartow Arena, and he had the entire coaching staff waiting there to meet me in person. And keep in mind, Coach Hilyer, he had a staff full of coaches that had played professionally and coached professionally. Coach Hilyer himself had coached with the Redskins and in the SEC. Coach Dieter Brock had been a superstar quarterback in the CFL and with the Rams. Played in an NFC championship game. I think it was really remarkable that Coach Hilyer was able to put all this staff together. But anyway, I was just blown away that they all took the time to be there for my visit and that they wanted me. and that they were willing to help recruit me to UAB. And so Coach Hilyer, he told me that the NCAA was forcing UAB to make the move to 1A, and that they would be moving to 1AA first for 2 seasons, and then transition to 1A. And he said that they really needed me to help make the transition. He said he wanted to build a program around me, and he did not promise me a starting position or anything really, other than just a chance to compete. And that was all I wanted. I wanted a chance to compete for the quarterback position, and he gave me his word that I would have that chance. And Coach Hillier was a man of his word, and I'll always be grateful to him for that.
So your first year at UAB was in 1992. You stepped in and made an impact. You had two 300-yard performances. One came in a loss to Tennessee Wesleyan, 16-12, but another came in a blowout win over Lindenwood, 41-12. So how did you feel after your first year at UAB?
Well, it was kind of like two halves to the season, and in 1992, I felt terrible, during that first half of the 92 season, but a lot better about the second half. And the truth is that I didn't make an immediate impact at UAB, at least not not on the football field. I enrolled in the spring of 92, but there again, I wasn't guaranteed a starting position, so I had to work my way up. And I was still struggling with some major confidence issues that had come up during the spring before at USM. And so I guess, to use a golfing expression, you could say that I had the shanks. And, when I say I had it bad, I mean, it was really bad. So for the first half of the 92 season, I was sitting on the bench. And, I only started 5 games that year. Chris Bradford was the starter, and he had played the year before. Doug Gann was the first quarterback, and then Chris Bradford was the only returning quarterback who had played. So Chris was a starter in 92, and there were other good quarterbacks there who were getting looks. And at that point, I was honestly thinking that football was over for me. And this is during the season of 92. And thankfully, Coach Hillier and Coach Brock, they were true to their word. Coach Brock kept giving me opportunities to compete in practice and in games. And my teammates, I can't even begin to tell you what they meant to me then and now. I mean, my teammates saw something in me that I just couldn't see in myself. UAB football was brand new. We had players from all over who loved the game. They were just fighting their hearts out just to get an opportunity. And these guys were so unselfish that they were willing to encourage me and try to help me get out of the slump. And so, I'll give you one example. One of our defensive backs, he came over to me during a game. I went in for mop-up duty one game, and I was really stinking it up. And Marlon sees me standing on the sidelines with my head down, and he comes over to me, and he grabs me by the arm, and he yells, "Hey, Whit!" And I thought he was going to give me a lot of crap about how bad I was playing. And instead, he looked me straight in the eye and he said, "Hey, we believe in you." And, that was it. So from that moment on, the light started coming on. I started having games like the ones that you described, and things got better and better. And, we played Sanford in maybe game 6 or so. And they were, top ranked team in 1AA. And, I played all the second half and played pretty well. And so the next week I was named the starter for the rest of the season. But that turning point for me, it really started because of encouragement from my teammates, especially Marlon. And, once I knew they believed in me, I was a much better player and started getting better and felt really great about the second half of that 92 season. I became very optimistic about the 93 season.
You had a good reason to. I mean, UAB went 7-3 in your first year there, and in 1993, UAB had an even better season, but it didn't come without a rough start. At 1-2, losing to Troy State 37-3 and Western Kentucky as well. If you look at the stats, you played great. The other teams were just better, but what do you remember about those games?
Well, I remember feeling that we were really competitive in the first half of both of those games. Both teams are one AA powers. Troy was number one ranked team, I believe, when we opened the season against them, number one in the country. And Western Kentucky was a top ranked team in that division. Also, Western Kentucky was coached by Jack Harbaugh. They had a really explosive offense, and Western Kentucky, they were doing these RPOs really before defenses knew anything about how to defend it. They ran a stacked eye, and it was a really unusual scheme. But Troy was solid on both sides of the ball, top to bottom. They were great, and I just remember both games being very close through the first half. Both of those teams had full 65 scholarships, and we were at UAB. We were playing at the 1AA level with only 30 scholarships, and our signees were really all freshmen or junior college transfers. We were trying to build a program, so the lack of depth that we had, lack of depth and lack of experience caught up with us in the second half against those two teams, those two top teams.
1993 was UAB's first year at the 1AA level. So what was the competition level difference like, switching from D3 to 1AA the next year?
I may not be, the best one to answer that question because I'm not sure I even played against any of the Division III teams that we had on the schedule in '92. I think there were only 3 or maybe 4 Division III teams on the schedule that year, and I'm pretty sure I was on the bench for all those. The rest of the teams we played in '92 were either 1AA, Division II, or NAIA, and so I've heard a lot of the guys from '92 say that Ferrum College in Virginia was one of the toughest teams they played all 4 years, but I didn't get to play in that game. And so I can tell you about the Division II and NAIA teams, and we played quite a few of those in '92. They had a few really talented players because they had scholarships. And Division II and NAIA teams had pretty good talent with transfers because they could take players that didn't meet the minimum academic standards. And so some of those D2 NAIA players had talent that was similar to ours, but I thought we were better overall. We had better coaching and execution, and our players at UAB were all heart. They really played with, passion and heart, and that just makes a big difference in winning and losing in football, probably more so than in any other sport. And the other thing is that the '92 team wasn't really a Division III team, in my opinion. We were a 1AA team in the making, and I think that was Coach Hilyer's vision. That's probably why he was scheduling mostly Division II and NAIA teams, and Sanford, of course, the 1AA team. I think he wanted us to play against better competition, or at least better talent, to prepare for the future. Coach Hilyer was recruiting players that he could take to the next level, and he had the brilliance to build a team around that vision, trying to move all the way up to the highest level. That was his vision then, and he recruited good players to UAB for it. So believe it or not, we had 2 Mr. Football winners on that '94 team. Coach Hilyer had signed Thomas Banks in '93 and Robert Davis in '94. And so once we started playing the 1AA teams, '93 and '94, I think the difference in competition really depended on who we were playing and how we matched up against those teams. So, in some games we would see a clear step up in competition, like Troy, because they had great talent. They had lots of D1 transfers. They were very well coached under Coach Larry Blakeney, and they had really good defensive line and secondary. From my perspective, they were quick off the ball. They wouldn't let me get to my set points in the passing game. Same thing with Western Kentucky. We had to use sprint out passes or quick drops just to get the ball out, to get passes off. And so, some of the other teams other than Troy and Western, they had great athletes like Jacksonville State and Alabama State, Mississippi Valley, Prairie View. They had really good athletes, but we were able to compete much better against them because, for a number of reasons. I think those teams played mostly zone defense, and they just couldn't cover Derrick Ingram and Cedrick Buchannon with zone. And so we'd get out ahead early, and we were getting better every game. Um, we had an awesome defensive front: Josh Evans, Bo Barton, Wayne White, and those guys they were very disruptive to those teams. And so some of the other teams we had to work really hard against. And maybe they didn't have all that much God-given talent. But, I'll give you an example. I think we were more talented than Butler and Wofford and Dayton. Those teams were really good, though, at execution and strategy. Then that made them harder to beat than some of the more talented 1AA teams. So we would pour through, run through Morehead State and, Mississippi Valley State and Prairie View and all those. But, they were probably more talented than Butler, Wofford, Dayton. But that's the neat thing about football. It's not always just about talent. It's about heart and strategy and execution too.
You guys obviously adjusted well because you finished the 93 season on an 8-game win streak. These included several strong games for you, including Charleston Southern and Butler, like you mentioned, but none up to that point were bigger for you than the season finale versus Prairie View A&M. In that game, you went 28 for 38 on 447 yards passing and 6 touchdowns. So you were obviously feeling it that day in Birmingham, but what can you recall from that game?
Well, that was the last game of the year, and I completed or almost completed my first full season as a starter. So I was starting to feel more comfortable in my own skin, finally. And the thing I remembered from that game is that we had a comfortable lead at halftime, and the coaches were planning to put in substitutes for the second half. And so Coach Brock came up to me in the locker room, and he told me that he would let me go back in the third quarter so that I could, finish the year strong and on a positive note. And I guess he remembered the struggles that I'd had, the year before, and he wanted, I guess he wanted me to really enjoy that last game. And he said he would take me out halfway through the third quarter so he could get reps for the other quarterbacks. And Coach Brock told me to make the most of it. So I did. I went in the third quarter and got a couple more touchdowns, and then I came out. And, he did the same thing for me the last game of the 94 season. And I'll always be grateful to Coach Brock.
So your senior season had another rough start with a heartbreaking loss to Alabama State in Montgomery, 27-24. You guys did get a win over Dayton, but then you had a string of losses to Jacksonville State, on the road at Kansas, and another loss to Western Kentucky. So what do you remember about that start to your senior season?
Well, I remember going into the season thinking that we should win 9 to 10 games. And I was very optimistic about that. And I really believed it. And I think the other guys did too. What I didn't know was that we would have to play the season without our starting left tackle, Jamie Edwards, and our starting right tackle, Keith Register. And so Jamie would have been a 4-year starter at left tackle, and Keith would have been a 3-year starter at right tackle. So we had some talented young guys ready to fill in, but there's really no substitute for that experience. And I still believe that we would have won 10 games in 94 with Jamie and Keith. And we lost Alabama State on a fluke special teams play and some other mistakes. So we had them beat anyway, even without Jamie and Keith. But with Jamie and Keith, I'm confident we would have beaten Jack State. And I believe we would have beaten Western Kentucky, which would have made us 10-1. And that still annoys me. It really bothers me.
My dad still talks about that Alabama State loss to this day. I mean, we lived in Montgomery at the time, so it was an easy drive for him. But he still talks about it to this day.
Please give him my apologies. I'll never get over that.
Well, you guys did bounce back, and you managed to earn a winning record at 7-4, including another absolute beatdown against Prairie View A&M in the season finale, this time on the road. In this game, you went 33 of 42 with 539 yards passing, which is a school record. and you had 6 touchdowns again. What did it feel like to finish your college career in such a dominant way?
It was really fun. It was a ton of fun until the third quarter. But I had to come out of the game then, and then I got pretty sad. Football had been a huge part of my life up to that point. Um, I put all I had into it, and I wasn't ready for it to end. Wasn't ready for it to be over. I started thinking when I came out of the game, I'm standing on the sidelines and I'm thinking I just took my last snap as a Blazer and maybe my last snap ever. And so I knew I wasn't going to be with my coaches and my teammates after that. I was really going to miss all those guys, and they had made such a difference in my life. And so, I guess I'm getting a little emotional now thinking about it, but I guess, the emotions started out happy. I was happy to finish strong and finish with an empty tank, but it stunned me to see it come to an end in that game.
Well, to finish it like that it's just tremendous. I know you were a little bit before my time, but judging by the amount of love and support that I got on my social pages when I announced you as my guest, the Blazers are faithful. We're definitely thankful for your time at UAB, and to finish on a high note like that was just amazing. But what are some other games that aren't in the record books, or games that might not get talked about as much, that you remember very well? And it can be good or bad games.
The one memory that comes to mind, it stands out really, and I think this one really should be on record, and all the Blazer nation should know about it and recall it. In 1993, we had won a home game against Dayton, and they had won 53 games in a row, I believe it was. And at that time, UAB was a basketball member of the Great Midwest Conference. And so that game, Mike Slive was the commissioner of the Great Midwest Conference. And he was at the game because, he was planning to celebrate, that victory. And he brought a trophy and presented us a conference championship trophy in the locker room at Legion Field for being the mythical Great Midwest Conference champions in 1993. And so that one really stands out because Mike Slive, of course, later went on to be the SEC commissioner and was very popular and famous. And of course, now we see what Coach Clark is doing with his championships and just really taking UAB to the highest level we've ever been at. But when Coach Clark started winning championships, it reminded me that Mike Slive had presented us with that conference championship trophy.
That's fantastic. I really didn't know about any of that. I knew you guys got the win over Dayton, but I didn't know about the streak, and especially to get that recognition from a great man like Mike Slive, who left a great legacy and just a fantastic person in general, and especially to get probably the first bit of hardware in UAB football program history. I know that had to have been something special.
It was a special moment, and I just wish we could find the trophy. So I'm trying to get the word out so we can track that thing down, or at least find a picture or something.
So I've had one of your former teammates, Cedrick Buchannon, on the podcast, and we talked about the role he played at UAB alongside receiving teammate Derrick Ingram. What was it like having two all-time UAB receiving greats on the same roster as you?
I can't say enough about those two guys. It was like having Jerry Rice on your right side and Tyreek Hill to your left. I mean, Derrick and Cedrick were generational players, and everyone can see that in their stat records. Most of their strengths, I think you'd have to watch game film to really see it. Derrick Ingram had the best hands that I've ever seen, bar none. If he got his fingertips on the ball, it was caught. You could count it. Another great thing with Derrick was the way he would set up the cornerbacks with his route running. Timing and anticipation are key in the passing game. And Derrick, he was able to make the corners overcommit with his body language and the way he set up his routes. Once the corners would turn their hips to come out of the back pedal, he was already making a break in the opposite direction. And so as a quarterback, This was a big help because I could tell when Derrick was about to make a break, and I could throw the ball well before he came out of the break, and that was very helpful. And this is why we were able to get the ball out so quickly against good defenses that like to bring pressure. We could anticipate and get the ball out early. And we were always taught, that the greatness of a receiver is his ability to change direction. Derrick had a great ability to do that and to fool the defender into thinking he was going somewhere else. And I think that and his hands were why he was the best all time. Cedrick Cedrick was incredible too because he was willing to do anything and everything to make a play successful. He was very fast and strong and quick too. He could definitely make all the explosive plays, the big gains. I think he led the nation in kickoff returns in 1995. So he had all those traditional strengths of a receiver for sure. But to me, the greatest strengths that Cedrick had were his effort and his determination. I never saw Cedrick Buchannon take a play off, not once, not in practice, not in games. He would sprint to the huddle, sprint to the line, sprint to the locker room. It was 100% effort all the time. And he was a completely unselfish player. He would sprint 50 yards from the other side of the field to make a block for Derrick or whoever had the ball. And he did that many times, and it resulted in touchdowns a lot of the time. So it didn't matter to Cedrick that he didn't have the ball. His mind was fixated on finishing the play and freeing up his teammate with a block or whatever he had to do. And I think his determination also made him a great pass catcher because he didn't think twice about laying out his body or going over the middle, jumping high for a tip ball, whatever. I mean, Cedrick had no fear of taking a hit. He was going to go after the ball no matter what. And really just had true courage and amazing work ethic. I think that self-determination made him great. Derrick and Cedrick, neither one of those guys came to UAB as a receiver. Derrick was a quarterback in high school, and he had better arm talent than I did. Cedrick started out at UAB as a defensive back, and Coach Sammy Queen saw his potential in 1992. He asked one of the defensive coaches to let Cedrick work with receivers. And as soon as he switched to receiver, Coach Queen started coaching him up, and Cedrick used that drive and work ethic to mold himself into a top player. And this is the kind of thing that was going on back then. We had great coaches like Sammy Queen, seeing talents in Cedrick that no one had seen before, and Coach Brock moving Derrick from quarterback to receiver. I know that was happening on the defensive side of the ball also and in the kicking game.
It also helped that you had an all-timer running the ball for you in the backfield in Pat Green. What was it like playing with Pat?
Well, of course, Pat was a great player. He was the all-time rushing leader up until Spencer Brown moved up in 19. And the thing the stats don't tell you about Pat is how he inspired us with his play and his personality. I like to tell two stories about Pat that say a lot about his makeup and who he is. And the first story was against Wofford in 1994. We were behind in the second half, driving in Wofford territory. Pat bounces outside on a run, and he had this great spin move. But this time when he spun around, one of the players ripped his helmet off at about the 35-yard line. It seemed like everyone kind of froze for about a millisecond. And then Pat just takes off full speed ahead, down the sideline, no helmet on his head and really nowhere to go. He didn't want to go out of bounds. He was just straight ahead. And the Wofford defense is just firing away at him, going for anything and everything. They were not shying away from his head. And so they finally got him down inside the 20, but it took 3 defenders to get him on the ground. And he just had an amazing special courage. Another story that I like to tell is from the Alabama State game in 1994. The first game of the year, it was really hot and humid and sweat flying everywhere. And, late in the first half, we're driving at about midfield, and I get smashed in the nose, and I've got blood all over my face, and I couldn't see very well. And looked like I was going to have to leave the game, go to the sidelines, but Pat grabs me by the arm and he, takes his own clean hand towel and, wipes my face off, cleans me up so that I could see enough to finish the drive. And we went on to score. And, Pat was just another one of those very unselfish teammates. And he was the best example really of sacrificing himself for the good of the team.
And now someone that you've mentioned a couple of times already, but what can you say about the program's first head coach, Jim Hilyer?
What can I say about Coach Hilyer? He was a winner, and that fact cannot be overlooked. I mean, he was the head coach at only one school, UAB. He started the program with no money, and he had powerful forces working against him. And yet he had the best record for startup programs over a 50-year span. And that's not my opinion. That is straight from the NCAA record book. I believe he had 27 wins and something like a 70% winning percentage. Coach Hilyer, he put together a staff of highly motivated coaches and put together players from all over the map in every circumstance you can think of. And somehow he's able to bring us all together on a shoestring budget and turn it into a winning program. And, we all have to kind of ask, well, how does that happen? It wouldn't happen today, I don't think, but he had a knack for recognizing talent that others could not see and for putting the players in positions that others couldn't see, just like Bill Clark does. And so I think that's one of the traits of great coaches. I think everyone knows that Coach Hilyer was and is highly intelligent. Everyone that knows him knows that. He's a very bright person. He'd coached at every level, coached with the Redskins, Birmingham Stallions, Auburn, Mississippi State. And he had a ton of experience. And like all great coaches, he was really good at psychology. He would use all of his gifts and, go out and find all of us diamonds in the rough. And he shared his vision for what he wanted the program to be. And then he just convinced us to get on the bus. And Coach Bill Clark, he does the same thing. He truly believes that the program can get better every day and succeed at a really high level. And he makes his team believe that, and so he wins. Coach Hilyer believed that UAB was a winner. He executed toward that vision, made all the sacrifices that had to be made, and he won. And Dr. Scotty McCallum and Coach Bartow, they believed, they supported us 100%. And now, with that same vision of Bartow and McCallum and Hilyer, Coach Clark believed, and he's made us a winner again and brought us back from the dead. So I was very lucky to play under Coach Hilyer and his winning ways. And we're just very fortunate to have Coach Clark, who's taken us to the top of the conference, and he's going to take us to the highest level that we can possibly go to.
So what are some moments that happened off the field that you look back on and remember fondly while you were at UAB?
I remember, getting to UAB in January of '92 and didn't know a soul other than family. I had two aunts that lived in Birmingham, but didn't know any students. And so, I would go to the weight room, which was in Bartow Arena back then, and had two weight rooms there that we were able to work out in. And so I would just go in and try to work out. And there were a few guys that really made a point to single me out and help me. And, that means a lot to me. Jamie Edwards is one. He would, he was a lineman, strong guy, powerful guy. Linemen typically don't work out with quarterbacks, right? So, Jamie, made a point to help me with my strength training, and he would work out with me. And so I didn't know a soul. He's a very outgoing guy. Everybody loved Jamie, so that meant a lot to me. And Coach Smokey Hodge, who was a linebackers coach, former star at Auburn, really strong guy. He would work out with me and just made a point to connect with me. And another guy, Chris May. Chris was our punter. And, Chris and I made a connection, right there in that weight room in Bartow. And then, we became friends right away. We would have to go and do plyometrics, and the plyometric boxes were out in Bartow Arena, on the end of the floor beyond the goal. And so we would do our box jumps and get all that done, and then we would wait for an opportunity to play pickup basketball out on the floor. And Chris and I would go out and play pickup basketball with anybody who would let us, get us a game of 2-on-2 or 3-on-3. And Tim Stevens used to play with us. He was a really good basketball player. And then sometimes, Coach Andy Kennedy, he was a GA back then. And if they weren't busy, he would come out there and play with us. And so I've never forgotten that. He was unbelievable on the court. So tall and such a great shooter. But we just had a lot of fun being around campus back in those days, and just being around great people and building those relationships.
So you've had some great analysis of, breaking down the defenses and, the coaches that you had and how it affected the game. But, compared to when you were playing, what do you feel is the biggest difference in the game today and compared to when you were slinging the pigskin for the Blazers?
That's hard to say because it's always changing. The offensive schemes are certainly changing a lot. Defenses are, constantly trying to counter that and catch up to whatever changes the offenses seem to be making and what the trends are. For a while, the biggest difference in the game was probably pace and tempo. Over the past 10 years or so, it seemed like that was a big difference in the game because that allowed offenses to get more snaps and get more offensive production, yardage, and explosive plays. And so, looking at it as a quarterback, I think we would have games where we would have maybe 50 or 60 plays. I don't remember having a whole lot more than that in any games. And then, there over the last 10 years, there have been quite a few games which, get up into that 80, 90, nearing 100 plays in some games. But, if the defenses are good, obviously that's not going to happen. And so I think defense is still key. It used to be, though, that the defenses, the keys to victory were basically run the ball, stop the run, and win the turnovers. And I think maybe now, possibly, and I'm no expert, but I think maybe now the keys to victory might be, make big plays, stop big plays, and win the turnovers. That's, that seems to be the way it is now.
So how is life now?
Life is good. I'm getting close to being an empty nester. My youngest daughter is a senior in high school. And so she just called my phone actually, but she is, she's got one more, not even a full year with us. So my wife and I are trying to savor every moment we have with her and really enjoy it. And, just make sure that we're spending as much time with her as we can before we're on our own again. So, I'm very lucky and blessed to, have two beautiful daughters that we love and we're very proud of. And my wife and I are just, looking to, be the best parents we can to them and even into their adult years, and hoping to, wait and see what the good Lord has planned for us after the girls are gone.
So I've got two social media questions here from my listeners and one lighthearted question for you. My first question comes from a former guest on the show and former teammate of yours, Mr. Cedrick Buchannon on Facebook. When I made my guest announcement, he said he's the top 5 in the UAB Pantheon. He and Hackney are in my top 5, as well as Josh Evans, Derrick Ingram, Donald Blackman, and Bryant Turner Jr. And he wanted to know, ask him about his ability to be available. And when I asked him to elaborate, he said he never missed a game. So how important was being available to you on the field?
Yeah, I mean, it was big. I mean, we had world-class athletic training staff. Dave Hensey had built a great team of talented student trainers and trainers, and we had great physicians with the orthopedic sports medicine staff. And it really was a blessing to have all that. So they kept us healthy. I was lucky that I didn't have any major injuries. I had a knee ligament that I tore my freshman year at USM. And then I had a pretty bad gash on my knee before the Western Kentucky game in '93. So I had some stitches there. The stitches kept breaking open, and they would have to drain it, wash it out, and all that kind of stuff. But other than those, I didn't really have any problems with injuries. So I was very lucky. Big believer in strength and conditioning. My dad was a coach, so I was raised on that, and I think that helped me, stay healthy. That and the quality of our training staff. Coach Billy Spruill in the training room helped us stay strong, and that kept the injuries at bay, at least for me.
And my second social media question comes from Paul Ensign on Facebook, big UAB fan. He asked, what was it like having Dieter Brock as the offensive coordinator?
It was amazing. Dieter is one of the all-time greats in Canada and in the NFL. And I think the great thing for me was not just his track record and his experience and his knowledge, but it was his personality. He had a really calming influence over me. And, I was pretty shy and awkward socially back then. And didn't always know the right way to relate to people. But Dieter was, he was even. He was very even tempered. He never got rattled or emotional. He praised us, and he encouraged us, but he told us exactly what he wanted. We knew what he expected. And, the other neat thing about him was that he was willing to adapt and change. And that's another mark of a great coach. After the '92 season, I believe he went out and visited with the Houston Oilers and got some real insights into the offense they were running with Warren Moon. And he brought it back and implemented it. And it was a big change offensively. But he was willing to make that change and implement it. And he was committed to, having an explosive offense. And we did. We were very, very productive. If going back to the earlier question, if we had a lot of the no huddle, fast pace type things back then, we would have had a lot more plays and a lot more offensive output. And I've asked some of the former coaches about what they thought we would have done, and they just say it would have been off the chart. So I was very thankful to have the honor of playing under Coach Brock.
Okay. And I've got one final question for you here. It's a lighthearted question, so that I ask all my guests. We're going to stick to the lighter side of bucket lists here, but what are some places on your bucket list, and which would you go to first if money and time were no object?
If money and time were no object, I'd love to travel, up the Eastern Seaboard and, visit places like Boston and Philadelphia. And I've been to New York City, but I've never been to, the Northeast. I haven't been to New Hampshire or Vermont or any of those places in the fall to see the leaves, because it's always football season and, we're tied up. But I've always wanted to do that. I've always wanted to go to the Banff Springs Hotel in Canada and ride I think it's called the Great Rocky Mountain Train Experience or something like that. They've got the glass top train, so I've always wanted to do that one. And then I guess the big one is I'd love to go to Jerusalem, love to go to Israel, and when it's safe, and and visit the Holy Land and do the tours there. So that would be special.
Well, those are some great places. John, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed hearing your thorough breakdown of your games and your time as a Blazer, and some of your great stories. I really enjoyed it. And And, so thank you so much for all your contributions that you made while you were a Blazer and still being a Blazer fan to this day.
Thank you, Will. It was a pleasure, man. I appreciate you doing this. This means a lot to us. And, I hope you keep it up. And if I could make one suggestion, do you need any ideas for people to interview?
I'm willing to take on as many former players as you can throw my way.
I'm actually former players, definitely, but I'm thinking former coaches, because I think there are a few out there that would do it, that are local, that would love to do it.
I'd love it. I'd love to hear some of their sides of history, and I know the Blazer faithful would love to hear it too. Just to hear their breakdown of games, and just to hear their side of being a part of Blazer history as well. So yeah, I'd love it. Bring it on.
Yeah, that'd be great. And again, I really appreciate, and I know all the Blazer Nation appreciates what you're doing with this.
Thank you very much. Go Blazers.
Go Blazers. See you, buddy.
All right. I want to thank John for stopping by the Dragon's Den and sharing some of his great memories with all of us. I wasn't born until December of 1994, so I missed his playing days, but I still hear stories about him from my dad, and I know that he meant a lot to the Blazer faithful, and it was awesome getting to know him a little bit more. So thanks again, John. And now we switch to another This Week in Blazer History segment, all gathered by longtime Blazer fan Steve Rutherford and graciously shared with the podcast. For this episode, I've got some birthdays and a couple of notable events from the school history, all from August 7th through August 20th. So August 7th, starting off with a big one. Happy belated birthday to the former guest on the show and another all-time great quarterback at UAB, Mr. Darrell Hackney. Darrell, like John Whitcomb, has his name plastered all over the UAB record books and was very well known for his connections with former wide receiver Roddy White and others. He was a great person to have on the podcast. I loved it, and I know that all you guys did too. So happy belated birthday, Darrell. I hope it was a great one. On August 8th, 1999, UAB lost a member of the family, Harry Hat Walker. Harry was a legend in Major League Baseball as a two-time World Series champion, two-time All-Star, and National League batting champion in 1947. He served as UAB baseball coach from 1979 to 1986, winning 2 conference championships and winning over 200 games. We move on to August 9th. Former UAB football defensive back Will Evans. Will played for the Blazers in the mid-2000s, and some of you might remember his iconic play in the final 2 minutes of the game against East Carolina in 2006, where he tracked down the ECU wide receiver and punched the ball loose inside the 5, and UAB recovered it for a touchback to win the game. Also on August 9th, a recent UAB baseball grad, J. Paul Fullerton. J. Paul just finished up his time at UAB after joining the Blazers in 2019. Happy birthday, J. Paul. August 10th, born in 1975, Igor Nikolic, 7'1" center that played for the UAB men's basketball team in the late 90s and early 2000s. Happy birthday, Igor. Also born on August 10th, 1994, a recent men's basketball guard that many of us remember well, Mr. Denzel Watts. Happy birthday, Denzel. August 11th, born in 1975, former UAB basketball forward Chris Lee, played for the men's basketball team in the late 90s. Also on August 11th, a newcomer to the men's basketball team, Mr. Jordan Walker. Jordan is celebrating his birthday on the 11th. Jordan comes to UAB as a transfer from Seton Hall in Tulane. Best of luck to you, Jordan. Looking forward to seeing you this fall. August 12th, current UAB football player Tamarius Brown. Happy birthday, Tamarius. Also on August 12th, former UAB basketball stud Elijah Millsap. Elijah played for the Blazers for 1 year, but it felt like it was a lot more. He made a big impact for the Blazers in the 2009-2010 season. Happy birthday, Elijah. August 13th, recent UAB football wide receiver Andre Wilson. Andre was one of the big offensive weapons in the years following the return. Happy birthday, Andre. August 14th, a fantastic guard for the Blazers in the 1990s, Mr. Corey Jackson, one of the school's all-time assist leaders, celebrating his 49th birthday. Happy birthday, Corey. August 15th, a recent UAB softball grad and one of the best players on the diamond for the Blazers in the last few seasons, Miss Annalise Petrie. Happy birthday, Annalise. Also on August 15th, the former UAB football defensive back, Duke Culver, who came to the Blazers in the return. Happy birthday, Duke. Former UAB football quarterback, Jeremiah Briscoe. Jeremiah played for the Blazers just before the shutdown and then transferred to Sam Houston State. There, he led the Bearcats to 2 FCS playoff semifinal appearances in 3 years and earned the Walter Payton Award. August 16th, born in 1971, Mr. Sidney Ball, one of my dad's all-time favorite basketball players. Sidney played for the Blazers from 1999 to 2004, was a 4-year letter winner and 2-year starter, helped the Blazers to a pair of postseason appearances, a quarterfinal appearance in the NIT in 2003, and an NCAA Sweet 16 appearance in 2004, which, as we all know, included the upset win over 1-seed Kentucky. He was the team's leading rebounder in his junior and senior season, and he is now the director of operations for the UAB men's basketball team. Happy birthday, Sidney. August 18th, we've got some big ones. Born in 1995, a former guest on the podcast and recent UAB football linebacker, Fitzgerald Mofor. Happy birthday, Fitz. Also born August 18th, a legendary coach, athletic director, and the father of UAB athletics, the late Gene Bartow was born August 18th, 1930. In his time at UAB, he was a 4-time Sun Belt champion. Bartow was at the helm of the UAB men's basketball program for 18 seasons, compiling a record of 366 and 203. In only the second year of the program's existence, he led the Blazers to the NIT, and then followed that with 7 straight NCAA tournament appearances. Overall in his career, he led UAB to 14 postseason appearances, 9 of which were NCAA tournaments. He also had decorated coaching jobs at other schools including Central Missouri State, Valparaiso, Memphis State, Illinois, and UCLA. He's also in the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame and the College Basketball Hall of Fame. Words can't describe how grateful the UAB faithful are that Gene Bartow came to Birmingham. We also don't have to go very far for our next birthday, because also born on August 18th, Murray Bartow. I didn't know that before seeing this, honestly. But like I said, Gene was born August 18th, 1930, and his son Murray was born August 18th, 1961. Murray not only played, but he also coached for the Blazers. Murray was an assistant at UAB from 1989 to 1996, then took over as head coach from 1996 to 2002. During his time as the head coach at UAB, the Blazers went to the NIT twice and made an NCAA tournament appearance. Murray went on to coach for many more years at East Tennessee State, South Florida, and UCLA. He's now the color commentator for the UAB basketball games alongside David Grain. Happy birthday, Murray. August 19th, current UAB linebacker Chris Moll celebrates his birthday. Chris has been a beast over the last few seasons and was named to the Bednarik Award preseason watch list and Conference USA preseason watch list this year after winning the first team all-conference honors last season. Happy birthday, Chris. Also on August 19th in 2002, the UAB family sadly lost another son, Mr. Carlos Williams. Carlos played for the Blazers from 1994 to 1997, and in his 3 years became one of the greatest players in program history. He's all over the UAB record books and is 8th in school history in total points with 1,474 points. The last notable event that we have here, August 20th, born in 1977, a former men's basketball player, Mr. Eric Holmes. Eric played for the Blazers in the late 90s and early 2000s and is best known for his 2 big performances in 2000 when he had 34 points against Charlotte and 30 against Tulane. Happy birthday, Eric. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Dragon's Den. Be sure to follow my social pages at Dragon's Den EFEL on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for listening again. Good night, and go Blazers.